Hello.
I did not select that fruity music for the intro. I don't know what that's about, but I see some like media videos, and so I'm playing with them. Anyway, the production quality for this podcast is going to be much better. We tried this last week.
Yeah.
It kind of sort of didn't work out. But at any rate, hey, did you hear about that San Bernardino shooting?
No? What shooting?
So there was a brand new shooting.
Oh, my.
And outside of my office, there was like a protest. And I guess they had the media here and the news, and there's like music blasting right across the street from my office. It was really freaking annoying. And I thought they were just having some kind of festival, but it turns out that there was this guy named Robert Adams.
Okay.
He was a security guard that worked in this like a furniture store out in San Bernardino. And he was shot, and he later died at the hospital.
Okay.
He's 23 years old.
Yeah.
And I watched the video of what happened. It's all over the news right now. Article on the Washington Post. I think they picked it up on CNN. But what it shows is there's this undercover vehicle that rolls up. It looks like it's like a Lexus or like a Hyundai or something.
Okay.
And they get out of the car, and they just start going after the guy. He turns and he runs. They said that he was like armed, or they thought he was armed, and it looked like he was reaching for a gun. But as he's running away, they shot him. And he died.
I saw a headline.
And so
but I didn't know it was San Bernardino. I thought it was
so
else.
The attorney Ben Crump, he's the guy that represented Trayvon Martin way back. When was it, like 7 years ago, back in 2015, 2014, about that civil rights case.
Okay.
And it looks like it's I mean, I don't know what's going to happen, but a lot of the information that got leaked out was wrong. I don't know. But from what I can tell from this video, it looks like those cops are in a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
And that's the latest. There was just a shooting like last week, and, another one this week. It just seems to all happen in bunches.
Yeah.
But anyway.
I see it's happened so much that I don't even open the articles anymore. It's like, okay, yeah, just another one, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, that's what's going on with this one. So how was the rest of your week?
It's been good. It's been busy. Lots of, I would say, paralegal, drafting, administrative work, but it's been good.
That sounds really exciting.
Yeah.
Sure. So I've been getting a lot of questions. Well, not even questions, just like actual cases about things that have been happening to my clients. And I thought that we would come in and talk about it today. For example, I'm just going to lay out a scenario. This is the latest one that I've kind of run into. So there's this couple, never married. They have I believe the child is 5 years old. 50-50 custody arrangement. They've been doing it that way for a couple of years. And then the dad in the case, who also has other children with whom he's paying child support, makes a pretty good amount of money. And he's been through the child support process, and so he kind of knows how it works. And he has tried to convince this other person, hey, you don't have to go through, open up a child support case against me. Why don't we just keep it between us, and I will give you whatever it is that you need, and we'll just do it that way. And he wanted to make sure that certain things were in place. He wanted to have like first right of refusal. There's all kinds of other custody stuff going on that they seem to have worked out. At any rate, the custody arrangement they have is basically a 50-50. So they have reached the Northern Star when it comes to custody and visitation. They can't really do better than that.
Nope.
Mom calls me and says that she is having problems and she doesn't want to have to keep driving. Well, they were having issues with the custody stuff. Bottom line, she asked me whether or not she should file for support because she was hearing different things.
Okay.
And I asked her, so what is it that you think he makes a month? And she's like, oh, I don't know. It makes like maybe 15, 16,000 a month, which is not chump change. She was making somewhere around the lines of like a third of that.
Okay.
And her main question was, if we have a 50-50 arrangement, could I still get child support? Of course you can, for many different reasons. So she goes to open up a case against this guy.
Okay.
And he gets really upset.
Of course.
And then he declares that this is bullshit. I'm going to take you back to court and I'm going to get full custody. And I don't work it. I work from home. And so I have the ability to see him more. I'm going to get 80% instead of 50%. You're not going to get a dime from me. And is basically has her scared. She's like, hey, listen, I don't want to lose my son over this. I just asked for support of the simple question. And this guy freaked out. And I remember with this particular person, I had another conversation with her a couple of years ago, or right around that time. It seems like, I mean, I don't know. But those questions were about 50-50. And, you know, she had asked me about support back then.
Okay.
And she was telling me that this guy was trying to do the same kind of manipulative tactics, which, by the way, if you're going to get a divorce or you're going to split up with your baby's mama, one of the biggest fears for most men and women is what's going to happen with support.
Yes.
And the party that's going to be liable for paying support, 9 times out of 10, I feel like, always has the same line. We don't got to open up a case. Why don't we just keep it between us? I'll just pay for whatever he needs. And so that is the scenario.
Okay.
There's a conclusion to this case because she's actually doing this on her own pro per, but I kind of gave her some advice on what she should do. And her case isn't over, but if somebody came into your office, let's say this young lady comes into your office, what would be your advice to her? I'll tell you mine, but I want to hear yours first.
Well, of course, if there was no issues about support, you wouldn't be, of course, looking out for advice. So obviously something is not working out. There's always the option of getting into an agreement and not having to appear to court, but it has to be put on writing and sent to the court for the judge to sign. I don't believe that, I never believe the other party when they say they're going to pay support, and that's a typical scenario. And when it comes to the custody, there's just so much going on, but I wouldn't really worry much about that. Especially if there are final orders. Just trying to get to pay me less is not really a reason to change custody. And the fact that she's making a lot less than him, even if they have 50-50, he's going to have to pay something. So, the child needs to be taken care of financially. So,
well, let's break this down. How many times have you ever seen a judge award majority custody to the other parent because they make more money?
Never.
Never. That doesn't happen. That's not a thing.
At least it hasn't happened to me. That's not a reason.
I've never personally seen it happen.
Yes.
I've seen it happen in other situations, like, for example, one parent is essentially homeless and is dragging the child around to all of these low-cost motels that are infested with, all kinds of nefarious people.
Yes.
I've seen it happen in that situation. But in a scenario where mom has a viable home and the dad has a viable home and they already have a 50-50 custody arrangement, it kind of takes us back to what we were talking about last week. What is the ultimate goal? What is the presumptive goal of any custody agreement? To get them to 50-50 if we can do it, right? And so if they're successfully doing that, why would we change that?
Exactly.
I'll tell you one of the reasons why they wouldn't change it, because one parent is making substantially more than the other. I've actually had a judge tell me, I won't name the judge, but I'm sure you've heard of him many, many times, that he was just he didn't want to hear any testimony about the socioeconomic standing of the parties.
Oh.
This is completely irrelevant. Because we weren't there to discuss issues of support. It was simply just, And what he was getting at was, because we were getting into questions about the living environment of the children.
Okay.
So, what kind of home do you have? How many
Mm-hmm.
bedrooms? Is there a backyard? Is there a front yard? Do the children have friends
Mm-hmm.
there? Is there a school around that they would go to? That kind of stuff. And then the judge wanted to just announce, because I think there was an objection from the dad, who was pro per, by the way, who wanted to keep on bringing up money. And then the judge straight up said, look, I don't want to hear any questions about the socioeconomic standing. We don't have to go too far into this, as a matter of fact. He just wasn't interested. So it doesn't matter if your baby's mom or the baby's dad is a millionaire and you're over here working at Wendy's.
Exactly.
So long as you have a viable place for the children to live, he's not in danger, he's not being neglected, his needs are being met. We're not going to reward the other parent with parenting time at the expense of the other party.
Exactly.
As long as all the other things are equal, right? So this idea that dad had, which, he's been through the system before, but he had this idea that, I'm just going to apply for more custody and he was going to get it. I don't know where he got that idea. I don't know who told him that, but it was not good grounds. Literally, he would have had to make an allegation that the current arrangements are not working out because my son is somehow in danger or being neglected or whatever. And what's funny? Like, a lot of times I'll tell that to some of the clients that are trying to get more custody, or they just believe that they should have more custody. And I'll say, well, look, what reason do you want to take time away from mom or dad? We need to know that reason. And they'll say, well, because they'll give some reason, but it doesn't amount to, anything that is dangerous to the child.
Give me a reason.
And then I'll tell them that's, and so I'll tell them that that's the law. And they'll be like, well, when they bring the child home, like on Sunday nights, they're all dirty and stuff. And, I don't think that he's bathing my child properly, or they're eating ramen noodles or all that kind of stuff. And so I just don't think that's in the best interest of the child. And then it just goes back, okay, so we're going to get nitpicky like that. The end result is, that is not going to result, in my experience, in a substantial change in custody, whereby you guys have had a successful 50-50 relationship going on months, years, or however long it's been. No matter how much dad doesn't like paying child support, it's just not going to happen.
Yes.
I will say, I'm not going to say in every case, but in almost all cases, the parents who has majority custody will not be paying child support to the other parent.
Yes, most of the cases.
Like, for example, dad has 80% custody. He makes 3 times more than mom, and he's requesting child support from mom, or, the other way. It's not going to happen. That's not how that's going to work. So the whole moral of that story was, it goes along with this thing where I keep on finding, I don't want to say it's mostly dads or it's mostly moms, because it's really not. I've really seen it on both sides, where one party really doesn't want to pay support. And so they're going to try to tell mom whatever. Hey, listen. We'll start sweet talking her. Why don't we just keep it peaceful? Why get the lawyers involved? Why go in front of the judge? Just tell me what you need, and I'll make sure that he has. You need shoes? Tell me. I'll go take him to Payless Shoes or whatever. We'll get him some shoes. He needs clothes. I'll take him to the store. But the reality of it is that a breakup and a divorce is very complicated. Most people that want to get separated from the other party, or are separated from the other party, would prefer a clean break. And yet it's complicated by this scenario where they're having to find a way to co-parent. And when you get into this co-parenting relationship, you find yourself into bad habits. And one of the ways, and I'm not going to get into anything about how people behave in relationships, how people manipulate each other in relationships. I'm just going to say that when exes are involved and a child is involved, I see it happen more often than not, where there is a dominant party. And again, that could be the man or the woman. I've seen it on both sides, who is trying to manipulate the situation to make sure that they're not having to pay as much support as they would normally have to pay.
Yes.
The other scenario is I found, there's another case that I'm involved in where, and it happens a lot, where husband wants a divorce, he's done with the marriage, or the wife wants a divorce and she's completely done. And they just happen to be the one that would be on the hook for alimony or child support or whatever. Oftentimes, in that situation, it's a little bit different because now you have two individuals who are currently living to each other, where there's this growing animosity, where they really don't like each other. And then maybe the one that's on the hook for support goes to speak with a lawyer. And then they find out that, so you could get a divorce, but this is how much you're going to have to pay in alimony. This is how much you're going to have to pay in child support. And they do it by guidelines, right? And then the guy's like,
yes,
screw that, cheaper, it's kind of where that comes from. And there's all kinds of different, and we'll get into some of those rules, but nobody wants to have to pay $2,000 to their ex. They kind of just want to move on. And so the other tactic, other than the sweet talking approach that, I've seen is the bullying one, where if you think that you're going to get a dime from me, I'm going to make sure you get nothing. I'm going to quit my job. I'm going to work under the table. I'm going to sell everything. I'm going to take everything out of you. You're not going to get a dime. You're never going to see the kids. I'm taking the kids. And this is what they envision, and I guarantee you they probably mean it when they say those things, but then they sit down and they talk with somebody like me and it's like, it don't really work that way, buddy. It's just not how it works.
Bring them back.
And to the people, the people that I've had in that situation, I have given them very explicit instructions. What would you say to somebody that is in that scenario that I just described? They're being literally bullied by their current partner, of whom divorce is inevitable. What would you say to them if they walked into their office and they're saying, I just don't know what I'm going to do. He's saying he's going to take the car. He's going to take my kids. He's going to leave me penniless. He's going to leave me homeless. What can I do? What would you tell them?
So
or him?
This is the one that is not on the hook for support, or the one that is on the hook for support?
Oh, well, let's throw out a hypothetical. Let's just say this couple is in their 40s. Let's just say that they've been married since they were 19 years old. 22-year marriage. They have 3 minor children, 17, 14, and 12. They own a house.
Okay.
They have 2 vehicles together, a recreational vehicle together. The hypothetical husband happens to be a doctor.
Okay.
Who is pulling home an annual salary of $400,000 a year, between $400,000 to $600,000 for the last 8 years, since he opened up his own practice. Mom, or the hypothetical wife, has not worked since she was 19 years old because she took time out of school and quit her job so that she could support this guy in his dreams of going through medical school and becoming a doctor. And the only way to make that happen was for her to be a stay-at-home wife. And so now here they are 22 years later, and he's saying, you know what, I'm going to get a divorce, and I'll tell you what, if you hire an attorney, I'm going to make sure that you end up with nothing, and you're going to be homeless, and I'm taking the children. What would you say to this person?
Definitely I will laugh first. And and let's just file it. In that specific scenario, that woman or man, it's that person's going to have rights to spousal support, child support, and many other things when it comes to the division of the assets. So that's just, like you said, some bullying, because the other person knows that they're on the hook, and they're going to just try to, of course, not convince him or her to take him to court. It will be just like filed right away, so that you just make sure that you start preserving those rights and getting that support that you need. So that's usually how it goes.
So I'll tell you what I would tell somebody in this situation. number one, because it's a real,
Yeah, it
like
is.
it's a real
It's
thing.
very
Like I've
typical.
seen people try to like lock their wife out
Yes.
of the house, and drain the bank accounts and all this kind of stuff. So when you file for a divorce, one of the things that happens by force of
Yes.
law, without you even having to ask for it,
Atros.
is the ATROs,
Atros?
automatic temporary. Well,
Yeah,
potato,
okay.
potato.
I call them atros, but okay.
The automatic temporary restraining order. There's an order whereby both parties are prevented from moving assets, canceling assets, selling off things, running up substantial debts, hiding assets. There is a freeze. I mean, not a hard freeze, like you can still spend money and stuff, necessities of life, but you are not to dispose of assets until the judge tells you guys what to do with it, or unless there's a judgment in place that says how we're going to characterize property. So if somebody violates that, there are severe consequences that can happen, up to even forfeiting the asset. Like, for example, in the most extreme of an example, let's say there's $1 million house completely paid off, and then husband thought that he's just going to sell it to his cousin Chewy because he's ready made and he wants to hide the asset from his wife in the divorce. If the judge finds out about that, not only will he forfeit his interest in that property, but the wife is going to get the whole thing in some cases. I can. Oh, no, I could hear you on my end. The other thing that happens is, I lost my train of thought. What was I talking about? Yeah. Step one, right? Here's another thing that I've started. Well, let me know what you think about this. One of the things I've started telling people in this scenario is, listen, if you have access to a joint savings account or a joint bank account and you're trying to split, it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world for you to withdraw that money, get yourself into a safe position, safe place. Maybe it's a hotel. Maybe you need to take you and your child because you're in a dangerous domestic violence type situation, and get out of there. And the reason I tell them to do that is because they're taking that money not to violate the atros. They're doing it for the necessities of life, which is to room, shelter, pay bills, whatever, that kind of stuff, take care of the children. There's not going to be penalized for that. I've seen people do that in many, many cases, and the judge doesn't do anything about it because the assets are accounted for. So, yeah, I took $40,000 out of the safe because it was all I had in the world, and he was threatening he canceled all my cards and kicked me out the house, and so I had to. And so the end result in that case almost always, in the cases that haven't gone to trial, is when we write up the marital settlement agreement, whatever you took, just keep it. And then we equalize it differently. You know what I mean? Yeah. So this idea that you don't have any ability to, you're going to be left penniless or homeless or whatever, it doesn't really fly. You have some remedies. The other remedy, which takes a little bit longer, you can't bring this up as an ex parte because finances are never an emergency that can be granted. But you can, when you file for a divorce, ask for temporary support orders. And the support orders are simple. Like they're going to take whatever his income is versus whatever your income is, and they're going to spit out a number, and those are going to be guideline support for child support and for alimony. The alimony may or may not stay what the guideline support figure is. If we have to litigate that issue, we'll do what's called a 4320 trial, where we're going to talk about like 16 different variables that a judge will consider in awarding a final alimony amount. And usually when we go to trial, in my experience, tell me if I'm wrong, if we go to trial on alimony, which is why it's almost never worth it if you're my client and you're trying to lower your amount, it's almost never worth it to go to trial on alimony issues chances are you're going to end up paying more than guidelines once we figure out what all of the, and that's not every case. It's just the ones that I'm, in my experience, and most of the time that's what happens. Um, yeah. 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 Well, generally, I would find if in his scenario, he would be okay so long as he has, as long as he could account for that money. Like put it in a trust account, put it in a different account, cash it out and stick it in a safe. So long as it still exists somewhere and you tell people about it, you're not going to get in trouble. It's when you try to hide the asset and just try to pretend like it didn't ever happen where you're going to get in trouble. And you know what? Most people, when it comes to these divorces, I've been involved with the ugliest of the ugly, where they're literally fighting about the dog, where they're fighting about the silverware, where they're fighting about a CD collection. Um, and the backsplash that they put on the kitchen. They want to uninstall it and they want it back. So I've had some really weird requests, but generally when it comes to finding the assets, because of the financial disclosures that are required in a divorce case, um, I find that things pretty much get divided according to law. Very rarely, when attorneys are involved, do have I seen either party get screwed over. It just doesn't really happen. I've seen it happen a lot when people are not represented. I've seen many, many examples where men or women have walked away from tens of thousands of dollars that they were entitled to in a house because they thought that, oh, he took me off title, and so therefore it's not a community asset. You know? Yeah, yeah. So let's talk about that. That's another big one, right? Like, okay, so what if you have somebody saying, I don't know, there's a house, but he took me off title, and we bought it during marriage, but he was the only one because his credit was better. What do you tell that person that's not on the title of the house, and they're worried about whether or not they screwed themselves over? Yes. Well, the case that you're referring to, I forget the name of that case, but I know the case you're referring to, and what they talk about. Yeah, I mean, it's actually simpler than that. They basically just reaffirmed the statute 8501 I think it was, or I forget 85 something, 8050 or something like that. But it was a statute that says if there's a transmutation, I mean, you start with the general presumption. you acquire something during marriage. I don't care what you think it is. We're assuming it's community property. If you're saying that it transmuted to your separate property, there has to be a writing. In the family code, there has to be what's called an interspousal transfer. And it says that, yes, I am aware that I am not on title, and I'm aware that this is his separate property, and I'm hereby waiving any and all future claims that this is ever going to be a community property forever. If that writing does not exist, or you don't remember signing it, or maybe somebody signed it in your name, maybe, I've seen that happen. If that doesn't exist, then it's going to be divided as if it's community property. The court has their right. If we don't have those statutory safeguards in place, then the court's just going to say, you know what, in my discretion, you guys bought the house 3 years into marriage, you guys lived there the whole time, but you're claiming it was separate property. I don't see an interspousal transfer. I'm going to split it down the middle. That's what always happens. I have a case right now where there's this guy fighting it, and he's kind of trying to bully his way into the house. Like, I want the house. The house is mine. And he's calling up the mother-in-law or the ex-mother-in-law saying that house is mine. You guys got to get out or whatever. But he signed an interspousal transfer, and it's pretty ironclad. Not only did he sign it, but it was notarized, and filed in the county. No, that's her separate property. He kind of waived that. I don't know what to tell him. I mean, I do know what to tell him. You don't get the property. That's how that story ends. But yeah, the only reason I bring that up is because it's another big one. That's another bullying tactic. You're not on title. You're not going to get a dime out of this house. And if you think so, I'm going to hire the best lawyers, and they're going to make sure you get nothing. Which I've been across some really scary lawyers. I've seen some really, really, really good ones. I've seen some really bad ones. There has never been a lawyer that I've ever seen overcome the requirement for an interspousal transfer where only one party is on title and we're trying to characterize the property, and he's claiming that it's separate property. I will say that there is let's talk about a situation where it does become community property, though, which is a scenario like this. This is another one of my cases where couple was dating. Yeah. God, I hate family law so much. Dude. No. But yeah, so couple was dating and they're thinking about getting married. And they set the wedding date and everything. They buy a house. Well, not they. He buys a house. Puts down payment, $5,000 or whatever the down payment was, a month before they actually get married. He's the only person listed on the bill. And nothing else happens. And so by rule, this implicates a lot of different stuff. Moore, Marsden, Epstein, Watts, all that kind of stuff. I'm not going to get into all of those complications. But because it was purchased prior to marriage, the correct characterization of that property, just from a purely academic standpoint, is that house belongs to the guy. That is his separate property. Now, here's what happened around year 7 of marriage. They refinanced, and when they refinanced, they threw her on title. So now what happens? Now you have a valid transmutation, and what would have been his separate property becomes a community property, subject to separate property reimbursements that, more Marsden and all of that. And really, I had to explain this to my guy, saying that, look, because he really thought he was going to get the whole house, and said, she's got a really good argument where she's pretty much going to end up pretty close to 50% because you literally had the house for 1 month prior to marriage, and then you've refied it, and then you threw her on the title. But what about this hypothetical? Well, that's what happened. It's the law. Yeah. there is one exception to that to this case though. Well, it's not really an exception. Okay, so let's say in my hypothetical, let's say that there wasn't a refi. They just never refied. He bought it a month prior to marriage, and they lived there during marriage. They got separated, and then they got a divorce, and had been separated for a few years. What is the end result of that? Does she get anything? Because there's not a transmutation. What is she entitled? Yep. Yeah. We won't get into the math of it, but you're right. So like it's really simple. I mean, he gets a dollar for dollar reimbursement for his separate property contribution for the down payment. You put in 5,000, you get 5,000 back. 100,000, you get 100,000 back. But the community, every dollar that you make during marriage is 50 cents hers, 50 cents his, which means you guys are both contributing to the mortgage, even if she never worked a day in her life. That's just the way community property works. And so the community gains an interest in the property. And what the person who is not entitled or not on title, what they're entitled to, God, that's a mouthful. So as the house appreciates in value, let's say you buy a house for $100,000. And in this case, let's just say a month later they get married. So the house is worth $100,000 on the day they get married. By the time they get divorced, the house appreciates in value to say $200,000. She's entitled to one half of the appreciation from the years that they spent while they were married. Community interest. He's entitled to the appreciation prior to marriage and after marriage. And that's when you get in all this fancy math. And I'll be honest with you, a lot of attorneys, they don't know how to do it. And if you ever read that case, Epstein, Watts, Moore, Marsden, the formulas, if you've ever tried to it's like literally, it's like legit doing calculus, trying to figure it all out. Yeah. Yeah. I'm not that interested. I don't know who it's interesting to. I mean, I'd rather not have to I'll just give me a calculator. I'll put the numbers in, spit out the number. But yeah, I guess the point is that if you're being bullied or if your current future ex is over here telling you that you're not going to get anything, you're going to be left homeless, you're not going to get the children, you're not going to get alimony, you're not going to get the support. When he comes into my office and he wants to know like what your rights are and what his rights are, I'm going to sit down and we're going to have a hard talk. And we're going to say, listen, I understand that you don't like her, but that's still the mother of your children. And that's still a wife that you had for however many years. And she has some rights. And if you were lucky enough to realize you were in a bad marriage and you cut that off prior to 10 years, good for you, because you're not on the hook for what's called a long-term marriage, whereby it's actually illegal for a judge to make a alimony order with an expiration date, which means that when they make an order, it's going to be for the rest of her life or until she remarries, whichever happens first. If you are married, say, for 8 years, and there's an award of alimony, there's a presumption it's going to be for half the length of the marriage. So 8 years equals 4 years. And, but over 10 years, you don't get that privilege. So, and unfortunately, I don't see enough short-term marriages. It's always, oh no, right at the 10-year mark or just over the 10-year mark or 20-year marriages. It's always this really sad thing. And I got to tell you, man, I mean, we talk very flippantly about family law. We have so far about this podcast, but it is a very jarring thing to sit with a couple at the table when you're sitting there taking status, and you're arguing at each other's throats about credits and disbursements and equalization payments and what are we doing with the trucks and all this kind of stuff. But now we're taking status, and the judge asks you, so has irreconcilable differences arisen in your marriage such that no amount of counseling can fix it? And then you say, yes. Do you want to get divorced from your husband? Yes, I do. Do you want to be restored to the status of a single person? Yes, I do. And then, you think that it's going to be this happy thing, but no, they get all teary-eyed and emotional. And the last time both parties started crying, and then I felt like bad because I thought it was going to be like a happy occasion because I lose touch that, gosh, these people are throwing away 25 years of their life and they're moving on, but it's sad. It's a very sad thing that happens. And in that moment, no, just in that moment, it's just a very tragic thing. It's happy, but it's very tragic. You're closing a chapter officially. And so, there is a flip side of that, though. One of my favorite clients ever was like this 25, 26-year-old guy. He got married when he was 22, got married to the wrong woman, as so many people do. But gosh, and he's in my ear bitching about, I can't believe she gets this much. I was only married for 2 years. Why does she get half my house? And why do I got to pay her anything? Well, why does she get this? And she took $40,000 from me and all this kind of stuff. And I'm saying, look, you don't have no idea how lucky you are to have realized 2 years in that this was not going to work out. You're a 25-year-old man. You seem to be doing well for yourself. You're going to have the ability now to go out and explore America, go be single, go do your thing. You've learned a valuable lesson, live on and be free, young man. And I told him at the end of it, that was a very happy occasion. It was hilarious. He wanted to smoke a cigar with me at the end of it, and they were officially divorced. So sometimes it is like genuinely happy, but these longer marriages, I mean, gosh, it's really, really sad. Yeah, yeah. It's funny. I had one lady give me this weird, like, she was gosh, she wanted everything. She wanted everything. Like she wanted 100% of the house, and she wanted double the alimony, whatever the guidelines. And so at the end of the case, I mean, it goes, sometimes I got to put my clients in check. Like, look, you're not going to get all of this stuff. You're entitled to so much. And at the end of that case, she got everything she was legally entitled to. And at the end of it, she said she was going to pray for me, because she felt like she should have got more. So she's going to say some prayers for me. It's like, okay, well, I appreciate it. I'll pray for you too, then, I guess. I mean, they get really, really nasty. But, I mean, I think just getting back to the point of what do you do when the other party is trying to bully you into doing stuff? I mean, look, it's a tactic. It's a tactic. One of the things that people do. Yeah, they're trying to manipulate you into preventing you from getting what you're entitled to, because for them, it's the difference between, look, I'll tell you what, don't go to the judge. We don't got to file anything. I'll tell you what, I'm going to give you $300 a month. No questions asked. You need more? Just tell me. I'll give you more. And then we'll do it that way. But when I run the numbers and I see what guideline support would be, she would have got $1,500 a month, no questions asked, with a withdrawal order on his paycheck, have his wages garnished. And look, the point of it is, it's not just that we're trying to be unfair. It's just that we're trying to get a clean break. One of the ways in the 6200 series, Family Code talks about domestic violence, that parties control each other through the finances. And if you're supposed to be broken up and you got this guy that's constantly telling you that, if you even think about going to child support, I'm going to take your children from you. Number one, that's never going to happen because nobody cares about what you think should happen. It's in the best interest. We're going to do is in the best interest of your child. You're not just going to take the children because you don't want to because you don't want to pay child support. And by the way, how many clients have you had come to you, ask you if tell you that they wanted to give full custody to the kids because they didn't want to pay child support? Almost every single one. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And so, yeah. And so people just need to understand, look, do not be afraid to come, just speak with an attorney. Even if you can't even if you cannot afford to hire somebody, you need to sit down with somebody like me, whether you're going to end up paying support or you're entitled to support. You really need to know what it is that you're entitled to. You may have done some things to forfeit your rights to certain things, but chances are you're probably entitled to half. And somebody like me would explain to you exactly why that is. And it's a very powerful thing to be able to say to the person trying to bully and manipulate you, you're not going to get a dime. It's very powerful to be able to have spoken to somebody like me and say, well, actually, I'm not sure that you know how that works. You might want to go get your own legal consult yourself. Matter of fact, I know a guy, you know, um, when people are, yeah, yeah, 'Right. Exactly. 100%. Yeah. Why am I going to give her $1,000 a month? She's just going to go take it to Ensenada or whatever. It's like, look, it's none of your business about what they spend that money on. It really has nothing to do with you. You shouldn't be checking up on her like that anyway. And so your obligation is to pay a guideline amount per month. Pay that amount and be done with it. You don't have to ask any questions. If somehow it comes to pass that there is a safety concern with your child because of neglect, like you're saying, then we could do something about it. But until that happens, I don't want to hear, I mean, I don't ever say I don't want to hear. I mean, tell me all you want, but I'm just going to let you know. Um, the court is not going to require her to give you an accounting of what she did with that money. That's none of your business, and we're not going to get that involved. And so, okay. Oh, yeah, I get that a lot. I get it a lot. It's like, no, I cannot do that. We can't do that. Um, what about, okay, here's the other one. He's telling me I'm not going to get any support. I keep on saying he. The only reason I'm doing that is because that's the case studies that I give my clients. They keep on saying that I'm not going to get support because he's claiming he doesn't work, but I know he works, but he gets paid under the table. He gets paid in cash. Um, what do you say to somebody like that? How are we going to prove his income? Exactly. Well, like like you said, they're going to have to explain their expenses. Like, if people look, there's people that legitimately own their own business that get paid in cash. That's fine. Um, is it possible to hide your income? Yeah, it is until you spend it. And once you spend it, um, there's a reason why money laundering is a thing, because you can't just own all of this stuff and tell the IRS I don't work. You got to account for it somehow. And so if you make $1 million a year and you want to bury it all in a home in Puerto Rico or Colombia or whatever, go for it. But the second you dig that money up and you start spending it on stuff, now it's like gravity. And that's the money that's going to be found. So yeah, hide your income, but you can't spend it. And what's the good of that? So, um, yep. Yeah. Well, it was a big inheritance I got from my uncle Chewy, whatever. Yeah. So we get to do something called financial discovery when there's a pending case. And that means you got to hand over all of your bank accounts, statements for the last 3 years, tax returns for the last 3 years, bills, contracts, meaning purchases of cars, um, things that you bought are recreational vehicles, um, dividend statements, and all of this stuff. Anything that creates a paper trail, we're allowed to discover it, and you have to hand it over. If you don't hand it over, you could get in a lot of trouble in the way of financial sanctions, motions to compel, that kind of stuff, paying the other side's attorney fees because you don't want to hand stuff over. Um, I haven't had too many problems with that because usually when I start digging around, people start to come clean because it's a really big pain in the ass. When I ask for financial discovery and I'm asking for all of this stuff going back for the entire time of marriage, 20 years of statements, which I'm entitled to ask for since they're the ones putting it at issue. We don't have to go that way, but if you want to challenge it, then let's find out what it is. And we can take it as far as you want to take it. I think the bottom line is when I have these cases, I really, really try to get them resolved quickly. And I deal often with these ideas that one side thinks that they're going to be able to manipulate the situation and trick the judge into awarding her no support. And it's simply not the case. And the quicker that we could all get on the same page with that, the better. Now I could bring you guys to an agreement that makes sense. And at the end of 100% of these cases, the family code is very effective in making sure people get what they're entitled to. And just because you don't want to pay it, you're going to end up having to pay support. And if you don't pay support, there's going to be arrears plus interest. Lots of bad things that can happen. Yeah, yeah. And that's another thing people should be aware of is the arrears. It doesn't just start if you fail to pay. Like if somebody files something in January and you're not in front of the judge until August and you haven't paid the other party any support whatsoever, they're going to issue what's called, more than likely, they're going to issue what's called a retroactive order, which is to say that we're going to make this child support order effective to the time that it was filed, which means if it was filed in January, you're talking about 8 months of support. If it's $1,000 order, you're starting with $8,000 of back pay that you're going to owe plus interest. And then what's going to happen is it's going to be $1,000 plus probably at least $100 to make up for the arrears that you now owe on the case. And so, look, if you're involved in a case, it's a really, really good idea to figure out what prospectively you're going to have to pay the other party, because you're going to end up paying it anyway. It's going to happen. You just have to assume that. You don't want to be the guy that is just going to, bury their head in the sand and I'm not paying her anything until somebody tells me to, because, if you pay her something, or at least pay her, let's just say you started paying her $1,200 a month from January, because you heard from somebody like me that, look, you're probably going to end up paying her this much. If the guideline support is lower, well, then it turns out that she owes you 200 times $1,600, and it might be a credit towards something, but it protects you from being stuck with this bill that you never anticipated paying. So as soon as somebody files something requesting support, you're on notice that more than likely, unless there's extremely extenuating circumstances, the judge is going to order some support in this case. And let's say what those extenuating circumstances might be. Okay, well, you just got laid off. You're working for Enron and you just got laid off because that company went belly up because of fraud and stuff, and you have no job. I mean, and you go to the temporary, to the hearing to order or issue temporary orders, and you tell that to the judge. They'll say, okay, what's likely going to happen is they'll say, that's fine for now, but we're going to come back in a few months and we're going to see how you're doing then. And then if you still haven't gotten a job, they might issue what's called a Gaveron warning, which is to say that, listen, you're 40 years old, you have a PhD, you have all of this work experience, you used to make this much. If you still don't have a job, or at least able to provide proof that you've been looking for a job in a way that makes sense, then we're just going to set support at what your old income was, and you'll have to figure it out then. They might do something like that. Very rarely does it happen, but it will. I've seen it happen before. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Right, right, right. Yeah, get yourself. I mean, you can't just not work and expect that that's just going to fly. Now, look, there are some. I will say that there are genuinely some people that don't have much of an earning capacity because they dropped out of high school. They don't have any work history. They haven't been able to hold a job. Maybe they're convicted felons and nobody wants to hire them. They can't really make anything more than minimum wage. They never grew up in life, but now you're over here making $4, $5, $6,000 a month because you have a grown up person's job and you got to support a child. And, in that case, you're not likely to get much of anything from support from that guy. And best of luck to him. Luckily, I don't see that too often, but when I do, I have seen cases where the guy's just genuinely just not employable. Almost just like, whatever the situation, maybe they're disabled. I've seen people that were legitimately mentally disabled or physically disabled, or whatever the case is. But in most cases, you're going to figure out that they're going to end up paying some kind of support. I don't know. Am I missing anything? What else were we supposed to talk about today? I feel like there's something that I was going to. Oh yeah, I heard that one. I get that question a lot. Well, what do you think, Ileana? What would you say to somebody that says, "Hey, could I just call ICE and tell her they're illegally, or could I put that in the family law pleadings?" What would you tell them? They will in criminal court. Yeah. I'll tell you the answer. Not only could you not put it in the pleadings, I mean, you could put it in the pleadings, but if you try to bring up that kind of evidence in front of the judge, you will get shut down so fast because it's actually against the law. You actually cannot bring up immigration related issues that are not relevant because they're not relevant to the case. I've seen it. I've seen people try to bring that up in restraining order hearings, or that she's just trying to do this because she's trying to get a VAWA through or whatever. You're not allowed to bring that up, and the judge will yell at you for bringing it up. So family court's not going to do anything about it. You can report them to ICE if you want to. I'm not sure. I've never actually seen that work. The only time I've ever seen ICE get involved is in criminal cases, for people that kind of had it coming anyway, or, maybe they're an immigrant, they got convicted of a deportable crime, and they did a sentence and the day of their release, they just get picked up by ICE. And now you're going to be spending time in immigration jail, which is I've seen that a lot, many, many times. But in family court, yeah, yeah. There is no law enforcement in the family law courtrooms except the bailiff. There's a bailiff, but the bailiff is not there to arrest anybody that for immigration purposes. They're there to keep order in the court. And the family law court is not there. It's not their purpose to adjudicate issues of immigration. They're there to make sure that you guys deal with whatever's going on with your family law case. And really, that's it. So don't let this idea that because you overstayed your welcome in the United States or you're here somehow illegally, that it prevents you from being afforded the rights that are written for you in the family code. You still get those rights. If you're married in California and you lived here a certain amount of time, even if you were married in a different state, hell, even if you're married in a different country, in most cases, yeah, we're going to get you guys divorced in the matter that you guys signed up for. There's a lot of different jurisdictional issues with that. We could talk about those another time. But oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Happens all the time. Yeah, I mean, I wish I could bring in my friend Mitch to talk about that. But generally, the general rule is, and I'm not really immigration is not my main area of practice. But as long as you have a bona fide marriage and you got your visa through a marriage, as long as you weren't trying to defraud the government, you're going to be okay. But there's actually laws written that deal with what happens if you divorce midway through your application. They'll still process it, still be good. Yeah. So do not let somebody use that against you, saying, "I'm going to make sure I don't get a green card. I'm leaving right now unless you sign this over the house." Yeah, that's not how that works either. So, yeah, generally, if they're telling you that and they're telling you that in that tone, in that voice, don't do something or else. It's because they got a lot to lose and you have a lot to gain. Either way, you really should just talk to a lawyer about it. Yes, yes. They've all learned that it's cheaper to keep her. And so they don't want to keep you, but they want it to be cheap. And, it's kind of hard to bring those two worlds together. Reality is divorce costs money. Children cost money. If you have children and you're not with the baby's mom anymore, you're going to have to pay for them, and vice versa. Gosh, I think, you know what? Did you realize we were going on for over an hour now? Time just kind of flew by there. Yeah. Do you have any crazy stories from the week? I used to get that all the time. I used to get that when I was just starting out, but then my grades started coming in, and so people started believing me. You don't want to. Well, there was that one case. What about that one case where you won because the other party was late, and then you ran out of the courthouse? Yeah. Yeah, get there in and out. And plus, that judge was already pissed off at that lady anyway. Don't fake COVID and try to get it out of it because the judge will be mad at you. Yeah, exactly. Oh, look at all of these. I forgot to use all of this stuff. Like, my fault on that one. I didn't know it was going to be that long. Well, I don't have them, but it's just like these options to. I didn't. I'm playing around with these later, but no. So I had a client come in, not a client, a prospective, 90 years old, 90 years old, and then my assistant scheduled the consult for me, and then I looked at what the case was about, and it's basically an elder abuse case, prospectively, but the client was 90 years old. Like, okay, fine. So I sat her down, and she wanted to tell me about a motorhome that she owns, and she thinks that her sister, who is 71, is trying to steal it from her. They're both on title, but interestingly, they're both on title because of as joint tenants with rider survivorship, like they're a married couple or something. Which tells me that whoever passed that when they were filing it screwed it up because that's not supposed to happen unless it's a married. But anyway, they're on title like that, like it's a, you know, um, the motorhome was worth like $90,000 or something. She says she thinks, and she wanted to sue her sister for elder abuse. Um, and she was telling her story, and then at some point it got to the point where she offered me like $85,000 to buy me out of it, but I just want to know if I could sue her for elder abuse. I'm like, well, wait a minute, you just said it's worth $90,000. So yeah, but she could. She said she called my doctors, and she said that I'm not allowed to make decisions about stuff because I'm senile. I'm not senile. I go and I pull my weeds every morning, and um, I call my doctors every day. Like, well, and they keep on telling me that I'm forgetful and I don't, but I'm not. I'm here, and I'm I was like, okay. But check this out. Do you have a case? Maybe you have a case. I mean, I don't know. Maybe she fraudulently put herself on there, but she's offering $85,000 to buy you out of the property. And you're saying you could use that money to go into this assisted living facility. If I were you, if you were my grandma or you were my mom, I would probably tell you, the hell with the lawsuit. Just take the money and go. And then I had to explain to her, if you really want to bring a lawsuit, here's what's going to happen. Let's just say that you're going to win. You're talking about a 2-year civil lawsuit, probably 2 years in Summer, nowadays, start to finish. You're going to end up spending $40,000 to $50,000 or more in attorney fees for 2 years, probably more, because if it goes to trial, right? And then you're going to win. She's guilty of elder abuse. Fine. She's an elder herself, but she's guilty of elder abuse. What are your damages? Whatever it is, the house is only worth $90,000, and almost all of it just went to your attorney. So now you got the satisfaction of you won the lawsuit, and now you could tell all your friends, but you don't have anything to show for it. And then she kept on saying, "I've only got a couple years ago." I was like, "Well, in a couple of years, you might not live past the lawsuit, past the trial dates." And then at the end, I swear, she kept on bringing up the senile part, and then she asked me like 5 times if she could sue for elder abuse, and I had to keep telling her, yes, you can, yes, you can. And then she had somebody with her who was assisting her. He must have been like her son or somebody, and he's like, "Thank you so much. I apologize." And he's trying to drag her. I was like, "Come on, Mom, let's go." Lawyer said that you're not going to get anything. Lawyer said to take the money. Yeah. Look, man, sometimes going through these civil lawsuits is there's so much that goes into it. There's so much anxiety, so much fear, there's so much trepidation. Like, why put yourself through that? Especially if you're 90 years old. Just go enjoy yourself, man. Whatever you have left, go take the money and run. Unless you're going to be like that one French lady that she made that deal. Remember that case from law school? That lady's like 92, and then she made this contract with some 40-year-old about she was going to live out the rest of the days. All he had to do was pay her rent. And then when she died, he would get to have her condo or her house or whatever. But she just didn't die. She ended up living to like 122. It was this, and he died. He ended up paying her rent for that up until the day he died, which is like a few years before her. I think he died in the 70s, but he outlived her. And when they set that contract up, she was 92 years old. She lived to 122. Anyway, it was this story, this case in law school that I read. It reminded me of that case a little bit. Oh, in Puerto Rico, you guys have different cases. Yeah. Well, yet you still know everybody else that we all do because he passed the California bar. So I mean, you got to read something, the important stuff anyway. But anyway, exactly. So we've been going on for about an hour and 15 minutes now. I think that we had a very successful second podcast. This is podcast number 2. We have lots of things in the works, and we are taking. Really, I think that we're taking just requests. We're coming up with topics for the show based on questions we have from people that we come across. So if you're listening to this show and you have something that you want to hear us discuss, or you have a specific hypothetical, we'll talk about it just the same way that we did about some of these cases today, completely anonymously. But just please, please, please do not mistake anything that we say on this case or on this podcast as legal advice that you could use, because it is a really bad idea. There's something could be very specific to your case that changes everything. What I will say is Ileana, she has her firm, Clone on the Law, or what is it? Not Clone Rosa Law, Clone on the Law. I like Clone on the Law better. And I am the owner of the legal law firm. You can call us. There will be links in the description to both of us. Ileana speaks Spanish. I do not. I'm a gringo. I'm a Latin gringo. As they say, I'm Mexican. I speak a little bit of Spanish, but I mostly leave it to my paralegals. But yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us during the week. And next week, we will maybe address some of your topics. But other than that, I would say roaring success. And all right. Thank you. Thank you. All right, enough of that. No. Again, I'm gonna get these sound effects down. I promise. Next time it won't be so. I'm really gonna use, now that I know it exists. I'm gonna take advantage next week. But all right, Eliana, thank you for joining me, and we will see you next week, same time, same place. Maybe we'll do like an in studio thing. We won't have so many technical issues. We'll figure it out. No, I'm going to stop it. And all right, everybody. Thanks for joining the show, and we will see you guys next week.